The morning arrived without ceremony. 6 o'clock sun climbing over San Diego's eastern hills, painting the underside of Interstate 5 in shades of amber and rust. Beneath the overpass where the city's forgotten made their homes, Evelyn Frost opened her eyes at the exact moment she had every morning for 3 years, 2 months and 17 days. Not because of habit, because of something deeper. Something carved into her nervous system through 4 decades of military service. The kind of programming that outlasts uniforms and medals and the polite fiction that soldiers ever truly come home. She was 72 years old, her silver hair, once black as gun oil, pulled back in a tight bun that would have passed inspection in any era. Her face told stories in scar tissue and sun damage. The thick white line running from left ear to jawline. The smaller marks around her eyes from scope cuts and shrapnel. The deep creases that came not from age but from squinting at distant targets in a dozen different deserts. Her clothing was minimal but maintained. Cargo pants faded but clean creased where she pressed them against concrete. A Marine Corps t-shirt so worn the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor had become ghosts of themselves. And boots. Always the boots. Black leather military issue from 1998, the last pair they'd given her before everything fell apart. Laced with parade ground precision. Polished with spit and patience. Everything she owned fit in one canvas bag. Olive drab, standard issue Vietnam era, older than most of the people who walk past her every day. Inside, a change of clothes, toiletries, a faded photograph she never looked at but couldn't throw away, dog tags that weren't hers, and a small leather notebook filled with numbers that would mean nothing to anyone but her. The locals had named her the Phantom, not from fear, from observation. She had perfected the art of occupying space without claiming it. Never begging, never speaking first, never making eye contact unless forced. The kind of invisibility that came from understanding that visibility meant vulnerability. Her spot was the third concrete pillar from the South Access Road. She'd chosen it with tactical precision. Good sight lines, multiple exit routes, positioned to catch the prevailing breeze but sheltered from direct weather. And most importantly, it offered an unobstructed view of Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, 3 miles northeast. Every morning she performed the same ritual. Fold her sleeping bag with hospital corners. Police a 10-foot radius for trash. Walk the 2.3 miles to the public beach restroom. Wash in the sink with methodical efficiency. Return. Sit with her back against the pillar, body angled 45 degrees, knees drawn up, hands resting loose but ready. And watch the jets. F/A, 18 Super Hornets mostly, taking off in pairs. The distant thunder of their engines rolling across the city like something remembered from dreams. The sound helped, the rhythm of it, the predictability. Launch at 0630, again at 0700. Training runs throughout the day, the steady drumbeat of mission continuing while her own had ended. It reminded her of when the world made sense, when she had purpose beyond survival. When the question wasn't whether she mattered, but only how much damage she could prevent. 3 years. She'd been under this bridge for 3 years. Before that, other bridges, other cities. A decade of wandering that had eventually circled back to San Diego because at least here the weather was decent and the jets flew overhead, and for brief moments, she could pretend she was still part of something larger than the small, dark space her life had become. The teenagers arrived around 1500 hours. She'd noticed them before. Local kids, bored, restless, looking for entertainment in that particular teenage way that mistakes cruelty for courage. They'd thrown things at her twice before. Small things. Testing. She'd absorbed it the way concrete absorbs rain. Unchanging. Unmoved. But today, they'd brought friends. 5 of them now. The leader was 17, she estimated. Tall. Athletic build that came from access to gyms and nutrition. From a life that had never asked him to survive on 800 calories a day. He carried himself with the swagger of someone who'd never been truly tested. His name was Brendan, though she didn't know that yet. To her, he was just target 1, the one who needed watching, the one whose body language broadcast aggression 3 seconds before his actions followed through. The other 4 were targets 2 through 5. Younger. Following the leader because humans are pack animals, and teenagers haven't yet learned that some packs lead nowhere good. Brendan picked up a rock, small, the size of a walnut, threw it at her sleeping bag. It hit with a soft thud. Hey! His voice cracked slightly on the word, biology undermining bravado. Hey, wake up! Evelyn didn't move. She'd been awake for 9 hours. She simply opened her left eye, fixed it on the boy for exactly 3 seconds. Let him see what 40 years of looking at human beings through rifle scopes taught you about reading intent, calculating threat, measuring the distance between thought and action. Then closed it. Two of the boys stepped backward, unconscious response to something primal. Some part of their brain that recognized predator when it saw one even dressed in worn clothes and apparent helplessness. But Brendan saw only an old woman, homeless, helpless. His pride was on the line. His friends were watching. He couldn't back down without losing status, and status was the only currency that mattered in his world. He picked up another rock, baseball-sized, jagged edges, the kind of rock that could do real damage. He cocked his arm back, aimed for her head, committed to the throw with the certainty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. The rock left his hand. Evelyn's hand moved. The movement was economical, precise. 40 years of training compressed into 0.3 seconds of reaction time. Her hand intercepted the rock's trajectory with mathematical certainty, caught it, clean, one-handed, without looking, without flinching. She held it for exactly 2 seconds, then opened her hand, let it drop. The sound of stone hitting concrete was like a judge's gavel. Final. Absolute. Brendan froze. His brain struggled to process what his eyes had just witnessed. That wasn't normal. That wasn't an old homeless woman's reflexes. That was something else. Something trained. Something that operated on principles he didn't understand. For his thoughts could catch up to his fear, a voice cut through the afternoon. Drop it. Not a request, a command. The kind of voice that expected instant compliance because it had been giving orders to people with guns for longer than these boys had been alive. Brendan spun. 4 Marines stood 6 meters away. Flight suits. Coffee cups. They'd been returning from post-flight debrief when they'd spotted the confrontation. The one who'd spoken was mid-30s, built like violence compressed into military bearing. His name tape read Thorne, Staff Sergeant rank insignia on his collar. Brendan dropped the rock he'd been reaching for. His friends were already retreating. The social calculus had shifted completely. Marines outranked everything in their ecosystem. We were just... Brendan's voice had lost its edge. She's just some homeless... Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne closed the distance. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes transmitted a message that needed no translation. You throw rocks at people who can't defend themselves. That what your parents taught you. Brendan had no answer. He turned and ran, his pack scattered, disappearing into the urban landscape like smoke. The Marines watched them go, then turned their attention to the woman. She'd risen, standing in a position they all recognized. Parade rest, left hand clasped behind her back, right hand loose at her side, weight distributed perfectly, ready without appearing ready. The stance was unconscious, automatic, the kind of posture that becomes hardwired through 10,000 repetitions. The youngest Marine spoke first, Lance Corporal Maddox Reeves, 23, fresh from advanced training, confident in the way that comes from competence not yet tested by chaos. Ma'am, he stepped forward, trying for respectful, but his tone carrying an edge. You all right? Evelyn looked at him, said nothing. Her silence communicated more than words. Maddox glanced at the others, looking for support. The second Marine Corporal Wyatt Sterling nodded encouragement. What was your MOS? Maddox asked it casually, the way young Marines sometimes tested older veterans, checking if they actually knew military occupational specialty codes or were just wearing the attitude. The other Marines chuckled softly, expecting something administrative, supply, transport, something that would explain how this woman ended up under a bridge. Evelyn looked at him with eyes that had seen things these Marines had only trained for. A ghost of something crossed her weathered face. Not quite amusement, not quite pity. 0317. The words dropped into the space between them like ordnance. The chuckling stopped. 0317, Scout Sniper. The most demanding military occupational specialty the Marine Corps offered. Washout rate above 70%, the kind of MOS that wasn't assigned. It was earned through pain and precision and standards that accepted nothing less than perfection. Thorne's eyes tracked to her arms. Her sleeves had ridden up during the confrontation, revealing ink and scar tissue, left forearm, eagle globe and anchor, old style. The kind tattooed in the early 80s when regulations were looser and tradition mattered more. Below it, hash marks, 14 of them, each representing a deployment. More than most careers accumulated in 30 years. Right forearm, Raven and flight wings spread, clutching a human skull in its talons. Below it, Gothic script, silent death. Thorne's posture changed, straightened, an unconscious sign of respect, recognizing excellence. Ma'am, the word carried different weight now. You served. Not a question, a statement of observed fact. Evelyn held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single crisp nod. Different lifetime, different wars. Corporal Juliet Brennan stepped forward. 27, one of only 4 female scout snipers currently active in the Marine Corps. She'd noticed what the men hadn't: the way Evelyn tracked movement, the economy of her gestures, the precision that spoke of efficiency elevated to art. What unit, ma'am? 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, 82 through 91. Then other assignments, the kind that didn't have names on paper. The way she said it closed doors, made clear she wasn't exaggerating, wasn't embellishing, was if anything understating. Thorne recognized that tone, had heard it from the old-timers at the VFW, the ones who only talked about certain things after specific amounts of whiskey, and even then in fragments and implications. Maddox, still young enough to miss subtlety, asked the question that would change everything. Did you have a call sign? He asked it like asking about a nickname, not understanding the weight call signs carried, not understanding that in certain communities, call signs were earned in blood and worn like chains. Evelyn was silent. Her eyes drifted past the Marines, past the overpass, toward Miramar where F/A-18ES were launching on afternoon training runs. One pair, then another. The rhythm steady and sure. Then she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Raven 6. Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne's coffee cup hit the pavement. The sound of ceramic shattering was impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Brown liquid spreading across concrete like something arterial. But Thorne didn't seem to notice. He stood frozen, staring at Evelyn as if watching mythology materialize into flesh. The other Marines looked at their sergeant, confused, concerned. Sarge, Wyatt asked, "You okay?" Thorne didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing through memory, through childhood, through countless dinners when his father would tell stories. Most of those stories were standard Marine fare, camaraderie, hardship, the brotherhood forged in shared suffering. But there was one story his father told differently, with reverence that bordered on religious awe, with a voice that dropped low and hands that trembled no matter how much he'd had to drink. The story of a sniper during Desert Storm, a woman, the first female Marine to earn 0317 designation, who operated alone in the Iraqi desert for weeks at a time, who accumulated a kill count so high the official numbers remained classified 30 years later, who saved his father's life and 47 other Marines during one 73-hour period in February 1991. They called her Raven because she appeared from nowhere and death followed. They called her 6 because she led a team that only existed in redacted documents. Together, Raven 6, a legend, a ghost, a story senior NCOs told to illustrate the ceiling of human capability while simultaneously suggesting no living person could actually reach it. And now that legend was standing in front of him, wearing worn cargo pants, living under a bridge, carrying everything she owned in a canvas bag. Thorne found his voice. It came out rough, thick with emotion he hadn't known was there. "Ma'am," he had to stop, swallow, try again. "My father, Gunnery Sergeant Dalton Thorne, 2nd Marines, 1st Marine Division. He told me about you." Evelyn's expression shifted, the first real emotion since the encounter began. Not pride, something closer to sorrow. "He said you saved his unit. Highway of Death. February 91. Thorne's words came faster now. "He said you held a position for 3 days, 73 hours, taking out Republican Guard officers one by one until their formation collapsed. He said you walked out of that position covered in oil and sand, handed your rifle to the CO and said 3 words. They won't regroup." Evelyn closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. "Your father's name, Dalton Thorne. Little Dalton." Her voice was soft now, memory worn. "He carried a brass compass, engraved. His daughter gave it to him when she was 6. He'd pull it out 50 times a day, show everyone. Talk about teaching his son to be a better man than he was, to choose wisdom over bravado." She paused, really looking at Garrett now, seeing past his rank and uniform to the child who'd grown up hearing stories. "I'm glad he got to do that. Teach you. I'm glad he made it home." Maddox and the other Marines stood witnessing something rare. A connection across generations, history becoming present tense. The weight of service manifesting in the space between a dying legend and the son of a man she'd saved 3 decades ago. Thorne wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, military bearing reasserting itself, but his voice still carried emotion when he spoke. Ma'am, with all due respect, what are you doing here? There are programs, benefits. You earned. I served. Evelyn cut him off, gentle but firm. Then I came home. Coming home was the hard part. She gestured toward Miramar, toward the jets, toward the life she'd left behind. The things I did kept me alive over there, but they followed me back. I tried everything, the programs, the medications, the group therapy and the individual counseling, and all the ways the VA tries to fix what's broken. Some damage doesn't respond to paperwork. She looked at the jets again, a pair launching, climbing, disappearing into the southern sky. I stay here because the sound helps, the jets, the routine, the rhythm of mission continuing. It reminds me of when things were simple, when I had a purpose, an objective, a reason to wake up that went beyond just not dying. Out here, I'm close enough to remember who I was, far enough away to not contaminate who they are now. The honesty was brutal, raw, the kind of truth that cut through comfortable lies about patriotism and gratitude and taking care of those who served. Thorne stood silent for a long moment, processing, understanding something about service and sacrifice he hadn't fully grasped until this moment. Then he did something that made the younger Marine's eyes widen. He came to attention, perfect form, and rendered a salute, the kind reserved for Medal of Honor recipients and generals, the kind that carried the weight of debts that could never be repaid. Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne, son of Gunnery Sergeant Dalton Thorne. Ma'am, it's an honor. My father lived because of you, which means I exist because of you. Thank you. Evelyn studied his face, saw echoes of Dalton, the same eyes, the same jawline, the same quality of determined compassion that had kept his father alive when other men surrendered to despair. She returned the salute, crisp, precise, 40 years of muscle memory executing flawlessly despite the decades since anyone had saluted her. Your father was a good Marine. You have his eyes. Make sure you have his heart, too. She lowered her hand. Now get back to your duty station before someone marks you UA. The other Marines snapped to attention, rendered their own salutes. Maddox had tears on his face he made no effort to hide. Jules stood rigid, jaw clenched against emotion. Wyatt's hand trembled as he held position. They held their salutes until Evelyn lowered her hand, then turned and walked toward the base, silent, each carrying a piece of history they hadn't known existed 10 minutes earlier. But Thorne stopped after 20 paces, turned back. Ma'am, he paused, choosing words carefully. Would you teach us, share what you know, the things technology can't give us? Evelyn stood very still, the question hanging between them like possibility. Like the first crack in armor she'd worn so long, she'd forgotten what vulnerability felt like. Why bato him? Because what you know is dying with your generation. Thorne stepped closer. Because I can calculate windage, but it can't teach judgment. Because you're standing here alone when you should be passing on 40 years of expertise. Because my father told me the best investment a Marine can make is in the Marine standing next to them. And right now, ma'am, you're standing next to all of us. Silence stretched, Evelyn's face unreadable. Then something shifted, subtle, like ice beginning to crack after a long freeze. 6 stories, 6 lessons your technology can't teach you, if you can handle truth instead of comfort. We can handle it, ma'am. She looked at him, through him, measuring. 0600 tomorrow, Hangar 7. Don't waste my time. She turned, walked back to her pillar, sat down, resumed her position. The conversation ended, but something had changed. In the set of her shoulders, in the way she breathed, something small that might given time and care grow into something larger. Thorne walked back to base, pulled out his phone, made calls. By sunset, word had spread through Miramar like electricity through wire. Raven 6 alive, teaching at 0600. By midnight, 16 Marine Scout snipers had volunteered for a course that didn't officially exist yet. By 0545 the next morning, all 16 stood in Hangar 7, waiting. At precisely 0600, Evelyn Frost walked through the doors. She looked different, still worn, still weathered, but clean. Her hair pulled back with military precision, her boots polished to a shine that spoke of care given despite circumstances. She carried a rifle case, old, battered, covered in travel stickers from airports that no longer existed. The Marines stood at attention, Thorne in front. Evelyn surveyed them, her eyes tracking across faces, reading posture, assessing commitment, finding what she'd hoped for or maybe feared she wouldn't. She set the case down, opened it. Inside a Winchester Model 70, 1985 production. Woodstock worn smooth from decades of use. Iron sights, no scope, no laser rangefinder, no ballistic computer. Just steel and wood in the kind of craftsmanship that came from an era when quality was measured in decades instead of quarters. Next to it, a notebook, leather-bound, pages yellowed, filled with handwritten numbers and calculations and observations in careful script. Several Marines struggled not to smirk. They had cutting-edge technology, Kestrel weather meters, AI-assisted targeting systems, ballistic calculators that processed a dozen variables per second. And this woman was bringing equipment their grandfathers would have used. Evelyn saw their expressions, said nothing. She picked up her rifle, checked the action. The bolts cycled with a sound like mechanical poetry. Clean, smooth, perfect. 850 yards. She nodded toward the range visible through the open hangar doors. Wind variable, 15 to 20 miles per hour, shifting. Target is stationary but small. 6 shots. Show me what your technology can do. The Marines exchanged glances, then looked to Thorne. He nodded. They set up their positions, pulled out their devices. Kestrels measuring wind speed direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. Ballistic calculators processing atmospheric data. Rangefinders confirming distance to within 1 meter. One by one they shot. 6 shots each from the first group. Results: 2 hits on target edge, 6 complete misses, 4 barely on paper. Maddox lowered his rifle. Frustration evident. "Ma'am, the wind is too inconsistent. Our computers can't predict the shifts accurately. We need to wait for stable conditions." Evelyn picked up her Winchester, walked to the firing line, brought no devices, checked no screens. She simply stood there, watching. For 4 full minutes she observed, the grass at 200 yards, the flags at 400, the mirage shimmer at 600, the dust devils at 800. She felt wind on her face, on her hands, noted how it pulled at her clothing. The Marines shifted, uncomfortable with the silence, wondering if this was a mistake. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice carrying across the range with clarity. "Wind doesn't change, it flows. You're reading snapshots. Snapshots tell you what was. I'm reading patterns. Patterns tell you what will be." She raised her rifle. No scope, just iron sights calibrated decades ago and maintained ever since. Her breathing slowed, deepened, her heartbeat visible at her neck, slowing, steadying, dropping into a rhythm that seemed to bypass conscious thought. "See the grass at 200 yards. Notice how it moves slower than at 400. That's wind gradient, the boundary layer. See the mirage at 600, it's bending left. Wind at that distance is different from what you feel here. See the dust at 800. It's swirling, turbulence. But turbulence has rhythm. Every 47 seconds it pauses for exactly 2.3 seconds. That's your window." She settled into her shooting position. Natural point of aim, body relaxed, began counting quietly. 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. The wind paused. Everyone felt it. The sudden stillness before chaos resumed. In that window, Evelyn fired. The report echoed across the range. Sharp, clean, final. 3 seconds of silence. Then the spotter's voice. "Center mass, dead center." The Marines stood processing, recalibrating, beginning to understand that mastery looked different than they'd imagined. Evelyn lowered her rifle, looked at them. "Technology tells you what is. Experience tells you what will be. Your devices are tools, essential tools. But if you don't understand what they're measuring, you're just outsourcing thinking to silicon. Learn to read wind yourself. Then use technology to confirm, not replace." She handed her Winchester to Jules. "Your turn. No devices, just observation. Show me you can see." Jules hesitated, then stepped to the line. She stood watching, learning to see what had always been there, what she'd never noticed because machines had done the noticing for her. 3 minutes of observation. Then she raised her rifle, waited for the pattern to repeat. Fired. Edge of center mass. Good hit. Jules lowered her weapon, hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, from realization that she'd just learned more in 5 minutes than in 5 months of formal schooling. "That," Evelyn said quietly, "is lesson 1. Tomorrow, same time. Lesson 2. She picked up her rifle, walked toward the exit, stopped at the door. Oh, 600, don't be late. She left. The Marines stood in silence, processing, understanding, beginning to grasp that the next 5 lessons might change everything they thought they knew about their craft. That evening, Thorne found Evelyn at her pillar, watching the jets, a pair of F/A 18IS climbing into the sunset, their contrails painted gold against darkening sky. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely?" Evelyn nodded. Thorne sat nearby, respectful of her space but close enough to talk. "My father told me a story about Highway of Death, about 73 hours, about one shot that saved 48 Marines. Would you tell us that story tomorrow?" Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Jets roared overhead, one after another, the sound washing over them. Finally, she spoke. "Some stories cost more to tell than they're worth." Thorne waited, understanding that silence was part of the answer. "But," Evelyn continued, "some stories need telling, if they teach what matters." She looked at him. "Tomorrow night, 1900 hours, mess hall. Lesson 2 is about patience, about holding positions when everything in you screams to move, about the price of one perfect shot." "Thank you, ma'am." Evelyn nodded, turned back to watch the jets. Thorne stood, started to leave, stopped. "Ma'am, one more thing. We're assigning you quarters on base. Clean, secure. Yours for as long as you're teaching." I know you don't need it." Thorne's voice was firm but respectful. "But it's tactically sound. Can't teach effectively exhausted. Can't pass knowledge operating at reduced capacity. This isn't charity, it's mission essential." Evelyn looked at him, saw his father in his eyes, the same stubborn compassion. "Trial basis, 1 week. If it interferes with teaching, I return here." "Deal." Thorne walked away, smiling slightly, knowing she'd just taken the hardest step, knowing everything else would follow. Above them, jets continued their work, launch and recovery, mission after mission, the rhythm of service continuing endlessly. And beneath the overpass, for the first time in 3 years, Evelyn Frost allowed herself to imagine something dangerous. Purpose. The mess hall at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar was designed for efficiency, not comfort. Aluminum tables, plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting that turned everything vaguely institutional. But tonight, 1900 hours, 16 Marines sat around 3 tables pushed together, and the space felt different. Charged. Waiting. They'd finished eating 30 minutes ago. Nobody left. They were waiting for her, for lesson 2, for the story Thorne had mentioned that afternoon. Evelyn entered at precisely 1900. She'd spent the day in the quarters they'd given her. Small room, clean bed she'd made with hospital corners but hadn't slept in. Shower she'd used 4 times just because she could. Window facing northeast toward the flight line. She carried coffee, black. The way she'd drunk it for 40 years, because sugar and cream meant extra weight, and weight meant mission failure. She sat at the table's head, didn't speak, just looked at each Marine in turn, measuring them the way a sculptor measures stone before the first cut. Garrett broke the silence. "Ma'am, you said lesson 2 was about patience." Evelyn sipped coffee, set the cup down with precision, centered exactly. "How long could you hold a position?" She directed the question at everyone, but her eyes settled on Maddox. Still young, still untested, still thinking war was equations and technology. Maddox considered, wanting to impress. 48 hours, maybe 72, with proper preparation. Evelyn nodded, not agreeing, just acknowledging. "Basra, Iraq, February 1991. I held position for 73 hours. 3 days. 3 nights. Moving less than 6 inches total." The Marines leaned forward, some consciously, some without realizing, the gravity of story pulling them in. Evelyn's voice dropped, not in volume, in timbre, becoming something that existed more in memory than present. Operation Desert Storm was ending. Iraqi Republican Guard retreating from Kuwait. But retreat doesn't mean surrender. They were reforming, establishing defensive positions, preparing for a war that would cost thousands of American lives. She paused, sipped coffee. Intelligence identified their linchpin, Colonel Rashid al-Jabouri, Republican Guard. He was holding the retreat together, maintaining discipline, preventing panic. Without him, retreat becomes rout. With him, it becomes a defensive line that takes months to break. "My mission: eliminate the colonel, break their formation, save American lives." "Simple," Jules said quietly, "but not easy." Nothing worth doing is easy, Corporal. Easy doesn't require Marines. Evelyn set her cup down. Same spot. Muscle memory making precision automatic. The colonel was smart, knew we had satellites, knew we were hunting, so he stayed mobile. Never in one place more than 4 minutes. Never exposed. Always surrounded by soldiers in chaos and the fog of war. But intelligence found a pattern. Every dawn his convoy passed through a checkpoint on Highway 8. The highway we'd later call the Highway of Death, though we didn't know that name yet. For approximately 3 minutes during inspection, the colonel would stand in his command vehicle's turret, visible, vulnerable, killable. 3 minutes, Wyatt said, not much margin. 3 minutes if they were on schedule. Evelyn's voice was flat, factual. 2 if they ran fast, 90 seconds if they ran slow, and I had no way to predict timing on any given day. So what did you do? Maddox asked. What any sniper does when mission matters more than comfort. Found the perfect position and held it, however long it took. She described it then. The culvert, concrete drainage tunnel running perpendicular to Highway 8, 4 feet wide, 3 feet high, the perfect hide, invisible from above, protected from detection, with a narrow field of fire covering exactly the checkpoint location. She'd infiltrated at 2200 hours, full dark, carrying her rifle ammunition, water, nutrition, everything needed to survive, nothing extra. The first night was manageable, she said. The word choice deliberate, not easy, manageable. Adrenaline, purpose, mission clarity, those things carry you through discomfort. First morning she'd watched the convoy arrive, watched the colonel stand in his turret, watched him for 2 minutes 40 seconds, range 723 yards, wind gusting unpredictably from oil fires burning across Kuwait, smoke creating thermals that bent light and twisted ballistics. She'd held fire, waiting for wind to settle. It never did. Convoy moved on. Colonel survived. Day 1 mission incomplete. That night was harder. Temperature dropped to 40 degrees. Concrete pulled heat from my body. Couldn't move enough to generate warmth. Couldn't risk being seen or heard. So I lay there and shivered and waited for sunrise. Day 2. Convoy arrived early. 90 seconds. Wind worse. Smoke thicker. She held fire again. Watched the colonel drive away. Protected by chaos and atmospheric conditions. Night 2 reality began breaking down my body. Lying on concrete, no padding, no movement. Pressure sores forming on hips, shoulders, elbows. Muscles cramping from immobility. The human body fights stillness. Demands movement with pain that grows exponentially each hour. But I didn't move. Couldn't. Because 48 Marines were counting on me. She looked at Garrett. Because your father, Dalton Thorne, was part of a platoon that would assault that checkpoint if I failed. Because my discomfort measured against their lives wasn't even a calculation worth making. Day 3, hour 71. My body was shutting down incrementally. Dehydration despite water, exhaustion despite rest. The kind of physical breakdown that comes from pushing human limits past reasonable endpoints. The convoy arrived, on time. Colonel stood in his turret, and for the first time in 3 days the wind paused. She emphasized the word, paused, not stopped. The difference between zero and near zero, between impossible and barely possible. She'd waited for that pause, watching smoke patterns, dust movement, heat shimmer, looking for the sign that physics would grant a 2-second window. It came at hour 73, minute 12, second 47. Wind dropped, smoke cleared, thermals settled. For exactly 2.8 seconds, atmosphere between me and target became stable. I fired. 723 yards. One shot. No correction possible. No second chance. Bullet traveled 1.6 seconds, dropped 47 inches, drifted 3 inches left from residual wind, struck the colonel's center chest, killed him instantly. Convoy erupted, soldiers scattering, vehicles accelerating, careful retreat, discipline dissolving into panic. Within 6 hours, Republican Guard formation collapsed. Within 12, retreat became rout. Within 24, the ground war effectively ended. Evelyn stopped. The mess hall absolutely silent. 16 Marines frozen. Processing, understanding what patience actually meant. That's the shot that saved your father, she said to Garrett. That shot and 47 others who would have died assaulting that checkpoint. How did you extract? Jules asked quietly. Evelyn smiled, dark humor. I didn't. Not immediately. Stayed in that culvert another 4 hours. Because moving during daylight would expose me. Because patience doesn't end when mission completes. It ends when survival is assured. She described crawling from that culvert at dusk, body barely functional, muscles seized, skin raw, covered in oil and sand and biological waste because human bodies don't pause functions for mission requirements. She'd walked 2 miles to extraction, handed her rifle to the company commander, said 4 words, "They won't regroup now," then collapsed. Spent 3 days in medical, recovered, returned to duty. The silence was profound. Finally, Maddox spoke, voice barely audible. "Ma'am, how do you not move? How do you hold position like that?" Evelyn looked at him, really looked, seeing past uniform to the question beneath. The real question about human limits and how to exceed them. "You hold position by understanding that discomfort is temporary, but failure is permanent. You hold it by knowing Marines counting on you are worth more than your comfort. You hold it by accepting that being a sniper isn't about pulling triggers. It's about patience, discipline, willingness to suffer silently so others don't suffer at all." "That's lesson 2, she said, standing slowly. "Technology can tell you when to shoot. Only discipline teaches you when to wait. Tomorrow." Lesson 3, 1900, same location. She walked out, left 16 Marines sitting in profound silence, processing, understanding that what they'd thought was hardship was just discomfort, that what they'd thought was patience was just delay. Garrett found her later, walking the flight line, watching a different kind of jet operation. Night qualifications, F/A-18S launching with full afterburner, painting the darkness orange. "Ma'am, thank you for telling that story. For what you did for my father." Evelyn stopped, looked at him. "Your father earned his survival by being an excellent Marine. I made it possible. Don't confuse the two." Quiet for a moment. Then Garrett asked what he'd been carrying. "What's lesson 3 about?" Evelyn watched another jet launch. The roar, the light, the controlled violence. "Lesson 3 is about the shot I didn't take. About being human in a world that sometimes requires monsters. About moral injury and scars deeper than bullets leave." She turned to face him fully. "It's not comfortable. Are your Marines ready for hard truths?" Garrett thought about Maddox and his certainty, Jules and her competence, Wyatt and his youth, all of them and their assumptions about clean lines between right and wrong. "No," he said honestly, "but they need to be." Good answer. The next evening, the mess hall was more crowded. 24 Marines now, word spreading. Some from other units, some who'd heard about Raven 6, some just wanting to understand what made this old woman worth listening to. Evelyn arrived at 1900 precisely. Same coffee, same deliberate movements. But something in her posture suggested wait. Burden, she sat, waited for silence. Got it immediately. "Tonight's lesson is the hardest I'll teach. Not because tactics are complex, because truth is ugly." She sipped coffee, steadied herself. "Fallujah, Iraq, 2004. I was 52, retired, working contractor, called back because they needed experienced snipers and experience was scarce. War had changed, no clear fronts, no uniformed enemies, just chaos and insurgents and civilians caught between. Rules of engagement trying to civilize war, as if war could ever be anything but barbaric. Mission: eliminate a bomb maker, high-value target, responsible for 17 IEDs, 32 American deaths, over 100 Iraqi civilian casualties. He was skilled, paranoid, difficult to locate. Intelligence found him, residential building, 3rd floor, working from an apartment. My team set up across the street, 380 yards, perfect position, clear sight line. I acquired target through my scope and saw what intelligence hadn't mentioned. Pause, the weight of memory visible in her shoulders. He was holding a baby, 6 months old, maybe 8, working on a bomb with one hand, holding an infant with the other, using the child as a shield because he knew we had snipers, knew we were hunting, knew we wouldn't risk a child. Jules made a sound, small, involuntary, understanding arriving like impact. "I had the shot," Evelyn continued, voice flat, empty. Technical shot, through the window, between his arm and the baby's body, 6 inches of clear space. At 380 yards with my rifle, my experience, 92% confidence of clean kill, 8% chance of hitting the child. Commanding officer got on radio, voice calm, professional. "Take the shot, Sergeant. 1 baby versus 100 Marines tomorrow." "What did you do?" Maddox whispered. "I refused." The words hung like smoke. "Told him I'm a Marine, not an executioner. I won't risk killing a child on 8% odds. Find another approach." He ordered again. Tighter, harder, less professional, more desperate. Take the shot, Sergeant. That's an order. I refused again, said, with respect, sir, no, I'll wait for clean shot, however long required. How long? Garrett asked. 6 hours. Voice completely flat now. 6 hours watching through my scope, watching him work, watching him hold that baby, waiting for him to put the child down, create distance, give me the clean shot. It never came. Hour 6 he finished, packed everything, handed the baby to a woman, presumably mother, left, disappeared into the city. 3 days later, one of his bombs killed 4 Marines. Private First Class Nathaniel Brooks, 21 years old. My spotter. Killed instantly, along with 3 others whose names I learned. Memorized. Carrie still. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a dog tag, worn, scratched, the metal dull from years of handling. For 20 years I've asked, did I make the right choice? 4 men died because I wouldn't accept 8% risk. 4 families destroyed. 4 futures erased. Because I couldn't pull a trigger. She looked around the table, meeting each Marine's eyes. I can teach you tactics, windage, trigger discipline, breath control, but I can't tell you how to make impossible choices, only that you will face them. And living with consequences is harder than dying with them. Absolute silence. Heavy. The kind that follows revelation. Jules spoke, voice barely audible. Ma'am, you saved that baby. Maybe. Evelyn's voice was tired, ancient. Or maybe I couldn't pull the trigger and I've been justifying it for 2 decades. I'll never know. That's the cost of being human. Uncertainty, doubt, knowledge that every choice eliminates alternatives and you live with both. She stood slowly. Tomorrow we begin practical work. No more stories, just training. Teaching fundamentals technology can't provide. But tonight you think about this. About where your line is. What you can live with. What you can't. Because figuring that out now might save you from discovering it when it's too late. She walked out, left 24 Marines in heavy silence, some crying, some staring, all processing that war wasn't clean, wasn't simple, was about impossible choices and permanent consequences. Garrett didn't follow, knew she needed space, knew the story had cost something to tell, but later that night he found her on base housing steps, staring at nothing, or everything. He sat beside her, silent for a long time. Finally, ma'am, that choice, that refusal, that was courage. Or cowardice dressed in morality. No, Garrett's voice was firm. That was you maintaining humanity in inhuman circumstances. That was you drawing a line. Some things matter more than mission success. Evelyn looked at him, tears on her weathered face. 4 Marines died, and 1 child lived. You don't know what became of that child. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe that 8% risk would have killed them. Maybe your refusal saved 2 lives instead of costing 4. You'll never know, but you can look in a mirror. That counts for something. They sat in silence, watching stars, listening to distant jets. There's more to my story, Evelyn said quietly. More than homelessness. More than just choosing the streets. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because you need to understand. Your Marines need to understand that the war doesn't end when you come home. Sometimes it just changes battlefields. She told him then, the rest of it, the parts she'd never spoken aloud, after Fallujah, after Brooks died, after she came home in 2005. The PTSD that arrived like a delayed explosion. Nightmares so vivid she'd wake up swinging. Flashbacks triggered by car backfires. The inability to be in crowds. The hypervigilance that made grocery shopping feel like patrol. Her marriage collapsed in 2008, 22 years. Gone. Because she couldn't explain why she slept with lights on, why she checked every door 3 times, why she sometimes looked at her husband and saw targets instead of a partner. The VA tried, medications that made her feel like she was underwater, therapy that asked her to talk about things that had no words. Group sessions with other veterans where everyone wore the same expression of barely controlled chaos. I tried to die in 2011, she said quietly. Pills, had them all laid out, glass of water, note written, everything ready. What stopped you? A jet, flying over, F/A-18 from Miramar. The sound, it reminded me that somewhere mission was continuing, that somewhere Marines were still doing the work, and if they could keep going, maybe I could too. But I couldn't go back, couldn't be fixed. The medications made it worse. Made me feel like I was losing myself to chemistry. So I made a choice. Streets instead of psych ward. Invisibility instead of being broken further by systems designed for different kinds of damage. For 3 years I wandered, different cities, different bridges, eventually came back here, because the jets helped, because at least here I could hear proof that purpose still existed, even if mine didn't. Garrett sat processing, understanding. Until yesterday, he said, until yesterday. Ma'am, thank you for trusting me with this. Your Marines asked for truth, can't give them half of it. They need to know that coming home is part of the fight, that surviving war doesn't mean you won. I'll tell them when the time is right. Tell them tonight, lesson 4, because they need to understand that what they're learning isn't just about shooting, it's about carrying what comes after. That night, Garrett shared Evelyn's story, the full story, not just the legend, the reality, the cost. The Marines listened, silent, understanding deepening. The next morning, Colonel Whitaker arrived at Hangar 7, base commander, the kind of rank that didn't show up casually. Gunnery Sergeant Frost. His voice carried command and respect equally. I've been monitoring your teaching. Officially, you're not on the books. Unofficially, you're providing my Marines with training they can't get anywhere else. Evelyn stood at attention, old habits. Sir, I want to formalize this 8-week course, Fundamentals of Advanced Marksmanship. You'd be paid, housed officially, given instructor status. Would you accept? Long silence. Evelyn, looking at assembled Marines, at Garrett, at something inside herself she thought was dead. 8 weeks, she said, trial basis. If it works, we discuss extension. If not, I walk. No questions. Agreed. And I teach my way. No interference, no shortcuts. We do fundamentals properly. The way they were done before computers made us lazy. Done. Then I accept. Provisionally. Whitaker extended his hand. Evelyn shook it. Firm, brief, professional. After he left, Evelyn turned to face her class. Next 8 weeks, you'll hate me. You'll question this. Want to quit. Some will. She picked up her Winchester. This rifle. Manufactured 1985. No computer, no laser, no artificial intelligence. Just steel and wood and physics. For 2 weeks, this is your rifle. You'll learn to field strip it blindfolded. Clear malfunctions in darkness. Learn that technology is a tool, but craftsmanship is eternal. She set it down. Strip your rifles. All of them. Blindfolded. 90 seconds. Begin. 24 Marines scrambled, pulling out cutting-edge equipment, AI-assisted, precision manufactured, expensive. 90 seconds later, none had finished. Evelyn had already field-stripped her Winchester, blindfolded, one-handed, 43 seconds. Again, she said simply, until you can do it in under 60, until your hands know the weapon better than your eyes, until the rifle becomes extension of your body instead of equipment you carry. For 2 weeks they drilled. No shooting, just handling, maintenance, familiarity, building muscle memory that would function under stress. Week 3, real fundamentals. Trigger control, not just squeezing, timing trigger break to heartbeat, to breath, to micro movements that never fully stopped. Evelyn demonstrated prone position, rifle settled, body relaxed. She placed a spent cartridge on her barrel, pulled trigger, dry fire. The cartridge didn't fall. That's trigger control. Weapon doesn't move, body doesn't move, only trigger moves. So smoothly physics doesn't notice. Marines tried, cartridges fell, every time, for days, until slowly, painfully, they developed the touch. Week 4, breathing, not controlling it, using it, understanding that the human body is never still. That heartbeat creates movement. Breath creates rhythm. The sniper's job. Find the moment between beats, the pause between breaths, the instant of perfect stillness between motion. Week 5, natural point of aim. The concept that human body when relaxed points naturally in a specific direction. Fighting that direction creates tension. Tension creates movement. Movement destroys precision. Week 6, manual ballistics. Dope books, handwritten data, calculating drop and drift without computers. Understanding math so deeply it became intuition. Evelyn's dope book was art. 40 years of data, thousands of shots, conditions and results logged with precision. Make your own, she told them. Write everything down, every shot, every condition, every result. Technology fails. Your notebook won't. Week 7, they shot for qualification, using everything learned, fundamentals instead of technology. understanding instead of calculation. Results shocked everyone. Class averaged 73% to 91%. Hit rates improved across every distance. Precision tightened. Confidence grew. But more Marines understood why they were hitting, understood physics, biology, discipline, could troubleshoot performance instead of blaming equipment. Jules scored highest, 96%. She approached Evelyn afterward. "Ma'am, I've been shooting 6 years. Thought I was good, but I didn't understand, not really. Not until now." Small smile from Evelyn. "Good shooting is easy, Corporal. Understanding why you shot good, that's mastery." Week 8, integration. Everything learned plus technology back in. But now technology was confirmation tool. Enhancement, not replacement. Performance went higher. 94% class average. Numbers attracting attention across the base, across the corps. Final day, Whitaker attended graduation. Watch them shoot. Watch them field strip blindfolded. Watch them calculate ballistics manually. He pulled Evelyn aside. "Gunnery Sergeant, this needs to continue permanently. I want to establish the Raven program. Advanced marksmanship instruction. You'd be director. 1-year commitment. Will you accept?" Evelyn looked at the Marines, at Garrett, at Jules, at Maddox, who'd started cocky and ended humble. 1 year, then we reassess." "Done." They shook hands. This time Evelyn smiled. Actually smiled. Weight she'd carried for 3 years beginning to lighten. That evening, Garrett found her watching flight operations. Different mood, lighter. "Ma'am, congratulations. You're officially back." Evelyn shook her head. "Not back, forward. There's a difference." Quiet moment, then softer. "Your father would be proud. Of you. This. What we're building." "He is proud," Garrett said. "I called him, told him about you, the program. He cried. Good tears. The best kind. They watched jets together, watched sunset, watched the future taking shape. But Evelyn felt it. The cough that had started month 4 was worsening, weight loss accelerating, fatigue settling into bones. Something wrong, something deep. She'd ignored it, focused on teaching, on mission, on purpose finally rediscovered. But ignoring doesn't make things disappear. Month 6 would bring reckoning. And lesson 5. And the understanding that some battles can't be won with patience and precision. Some battles you just try to lose slowly enough to finish what matters. Month 6 of the Raven program arrived with autumn temperatures, California heat breaking into something almost comfortable. Evelyn Frost stood before her 4th class, 16 new Marines, fresh, uncertain, looking at this 72-year-old woman and wondering if the stories were real or legend amplified by time and need. She'd taught 64 Marines now. Watched them transform from technicians into craftsmen, from equipment operators into masters of fundamentals. The Raven program had gained serious reputation. Marines requested assignment, officers observed with interest. Something permanent was emerging. Something that mattered. But Evelyn noticed other things too. Things she tried to ignore. The cough that had started as occasional was now constant. Weight loss she'd attributed to regular meals instead of scraps was accelerating beyond explanation. Fatigue settling into her bones wasn't the good kind from hard work. It was something else. Something wrong. Something that whispered truths she didn't want to hear. Garrett noticed. He always noticed. "Ma'am, you need medical." "I'm functional." "With respect, you're not. You've lost 20 pounds in 2 months. You're coughing blood. This isn't a request." She went, not because she wanted to, but because refusing would have been weakness disguised as strength. And Evelyn Frost had built a career on honest assessment of tactical situations. The diagnosis came within 48 hours. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, metastasized to liver and lungs. Prognosis 4 to 8 months with aggressive treatment, 6 to 10 weeks without. The doctor was young, professional, sympathetic in that clinical way medical personnel learn to protect themselves. "We can start chemotherapy immediately. Radiation protocols, experimental treatments. We can fight this." Evelyn sat very still, processing, calculating, understanding. "How long do I have at full capacity able to teach, function normally?" Doctor hesitated. 6 weeks, maybe 8, then decline will accelerate significantly. Evelyn did the math. Current class had 8 weeks remaining. She could finish, complete what she'd started, give these 16 Marines what they needed. Whatever came after would come. "No treatment," she said. "Pain management only. I have work to finish." "Ma'am, we can extend your life." "You can extend my dying." Different thing entirely. I'm 72, I've had more time than most. Better time than I deserved. 8 weeks of good work left. I'd rather spend it teaching than sitting in treatment rooms hoping for a few extra months of decline. Our doctor tried arguing. Evelyn thanked him and left. She told Garrett that evening. Told him not to tell the class. Not yet. Let them learn without mortality's weight hanging over every lesson. He wanted to argue. She saw it, but he understood. This was her choice, her mission, her way of controlling the one thing she still could. The next 6 weeks were simultaneously the hardest and best of her life. Teaching with knowledge that each lesson might be her last, that each fundamental passed on was a piece of herself outliving her body. That legacy wasn't about living forever. It was about what remained when you couldn't. Week 7 of the current class, Evelyn took them to the cliffside overlooking the Pacific. Same spot she'd used with previous 3 classes, her teaching location. Where wind was honest and sightlines clear, an ocean reminded everyone that humans were small against nature's vastness. They just completed a difficult drill. Long-range shots, variable wind, moving targets. Marines were exhausted but satisfied. Improving, growing. Jules Brennan, now staff sergeant and assistant instructor, asked the question. Ma'am, you've taught us tactics, fundamentals, discipline, but what's the most important thing you've learned 40 years of service? What matters most? Evelyn stood watching ocean for a long time. Marines waited, patient. They'd learned patience from her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. Carrying across wind, I've taken 93 lives, confirmed kills, numbers the Marine Corps verified, probably more. Shots I couldn't confirm, targets eliminated but unproven. She turned to face them. For 33 years, that number haunted me. I thought my legacy was death, thought what I'd done defined what I was. Carried those 93 like chains, debts I could never repay. But in 8 months here, teaching, passing on knowledge, I've trained 64 Marines directly. You, 64. Each of you will train others. Who will train others? In 20 years, 30, 50. Thousands of snipers will use technique as I taught. Make shots I made possible. Save lives because they understood fundamentals I passed forward. Pause. Let it settle. And they'll never know my name. Never know where knowledge originated. It'll just be how things are done. The standard. The baseline. Maddox Reeves transformed from arrogance to humility over 8 weeks spoke. Ma'am, we'll remember. We'll tell them about you. Evelyn shook her head. Don't. Remember the lessons. Pass them forward nameless. That's real legacy. Not monuments, not medals, not stories. Knowledge that compounds, grows, saves lives in ways you can't predict and I'll never see. She smiled, tired but genuine. 93 deaths versus thousands of lives saved through better training. That's not redemption. That's compound interest on knowledge. And compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. Your legacy isn't what you took. It's what you gave that keeps giving. Heavy silence. Understanding. These Marines grasping something deeper than marksmanship. Something about purpose and meaning and how important things are often invisible. That night, Evelyn collapsed during evening meal. Simply fell. Mid-sentence. Mid-breath. Cancer accelerating faster than predicted. Body finally demanding acknowledgement. Rushed to medical. Stabilization. But doctors' prognosis shortened. Days. Maybe 2 weeks. Decline had begun. Evelyn woke in hospital bed, Garrett beside her, looking older than his 34 years. How long? This week, maybe 10 days. Nod. Acceptance. Finish the class for me. Final qualification. Make sure they understand why they're shooting well. Not just that they are. Yes, ma'am. And Garrett, one more thing. Anything. There's a demonstration scheduled. Next week, DARPA. Some new AI system claiming human snipers are obsolete. Press event. Big show. Cough. Blood on tissue. I want that shot. Garrett stared. Ma'am, you can barely stand. Then prop me up. This is my last class, my final lesson. Lesson 7, the one I haven't taught yet. What's lesson 7? That algorithms predict. Humans understand. There's a difference between processing data and reading patterns. Some things can't be coded because they require judgment earned through experience. And eyes that had seen too much and understood more. I need to prove it. One last time. Not for me. For every Marine coming after. So they know technology is a tool, not a replacement. That human judgment still matters. Garrett was quiet, then nodded. I'll arrange it. The demonstration was scheduled for week 8, DARPA's Sentinel AI system versus the Marine Corps' best sniper. Originally a young Marine, top qualification scores, expert marksman, the future. Garrett pulled strings, called favors, got Evelyn approved as the Marine shooter. DARPA wasn't happy. They'd wanted someone impressive, not a dying 72-year-old woman. But Colonel Whitaker overruled them. Said if Raven 6 wanted the shot, Raven 6 got the shot. The day arrived clear and cold. October morning, perfect visibility, terrible wind, 400 people assembled in Hangar 7. Marines, officers, defense contractors, DARPA officials, media, everyone who mattered and many who didn't. Come to watch the future replace the past. Sentinel A, I was impressive. $4.2 million of technology, satellite uplink, quantum processors, real-time atmospheric modeling, machine learning trained on 10 million shots. Marketing claimed 99.7% accuracy under optimal conditions. Evelyn arrived in wheelchair, Garrett pushing. She looked like death, pale, thin, weak. Marines who knew her wanted to cry. DARPA people looked embarrassed, like they were about to humiliate a dying woman on camera. Target set, 1,285 yards. Moving erratically on motorized track, wind gusting 20 to 35 miles per hour. Variable, chaotic, unpredictable. One shot only. Winner determined by proximity to center mass. AI went first. 12 seconds processing. Satellites feeding data. Algorithms calculating probabilities. Perfect technique. Flawless execution. Spotter called it. Miss, 4 inches high right. Target movement exceeded algorithmic parameters. DARPA, representative uncomfortable. Target exceeded predictable range. Under normal conditions, Sentinel achieves. Evelyn raised her hand, quiet. Everyone stopped. My turn. Garrett wheeled her to firing line, helped position. She couldn't stand, could barely sit upright. But hands steady, eyes clear. They brought her Winchester. Same rifle carried 40 years. No scope, iron sights, no technology, just steel and wood and knowledge. 4 minutes, she observed. Not through optics, just eyes. Watching. Grass at 300 yards. Dust devils at 600. Mirage shimmer at 900. Patterns. Crowd grew restless. Whispers. Wondering if she'd fallen asleep. If this was cruelty. If someone should intervene. Garrett knelt beside her. Ma'am, wind is chaos. Impossible. Evelyn's voice barely audible, only Garrett heard. Not chaos, pattern, cyclical. Every 41 seconds wind drops. 2.1 seconds. That's the window. Target's moving random. Not random, semi-random. 16-second pattern with variations. But variations have rhythm. Watch. Garrett watched. Saw nothing. Just chaos. Evelyn chambered 1 round. Hands shaking but rifle steady. Muscle memory compensating for failing body. She counted, loud enough for front rows. 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Wind dropped. Everyone felt it. Sudden stillness. In that stillness, target zagged left. Predictably. Following rhythm Evelyn had seen. She fired. Echo across hangar. Sharp. Final. Absolute. 3 seconds of silence. Total. Complete. 400 people holding breath. Then Spotter's voice. Shaking. Center mass. Perfect. The hangar went cold. Not metaphorically, actually cold. Like temperature dropped 10 degrees. Like physics paused to acknowledge what had just happened. 400 people frozen. Mouths open, eyes wide, brains processing. Old woman, dying, wheelchair. 40-year-old equipment. Just did what $4 million of AI couldn't. Silence lasted 8 seconds. Felt eternal. Then eruption. Marines cheering, shouting, chanting. Raven, Raven, Raven. Evelyn slumped. Garrett caught her. She was smiling. Faintly, peacefully. She spoke, so quietly only Garrett heard. Lesson 7. Algorithms predict. Humans understand. Remember that. Then in unconscious. Exhausted. Triumphant. Complete. Rushed to medical. She woke 3 hours later. Weak. Fading. At peace. Next 4 days Marines came. Every single one she'd trained. 64. Some flew across country. Some drove through night. All came to say goodbye. Jules brought a gift. Notebook, leather-bound. Inside entries from all 64 Marines. Data, techniques, lessons learned, notes on what Evelyn taught and how they applied it. Ma'am, your dope book taught us to write everything. So we did. This is our collective book. Everything you taught, so it doesn't die. Evelyn held book, tears streaming, unable to speak, just nodding. Maddox came, knelt by bed. Ma'am, I was arrogant, stupid. You taught me humility, patience, real strength. I'll never forget. Wyatt brought photos, shots he'd made, using her techniques. Syria, Orica, shots that saved lives. Because of you, ma'am, and all because of you. Parade continued, each Marine bringing something. Story. Thanks. Promise to pass it forward. Fifth day, Garrett sat with her, holding hand, didn't talk much. Didn't need to. Just sat, watching sun move across window, listening to jets, always jets. Your father, Evelyn whispered. Tell him I kept his son safe. Garrett's voice broke. I will. And ma'am, you gave me more than safety, purpose, understanding. You taught me legacy isn't what you did, it's what you taught others to do better. Evelyn smiled, squeezed hand weakly. Good student, your father would be proud. Quiet. Then Brendan, the boy who threw rocks. Is he here? Outside, wants to see you. Send him in. Brendan entered, 18 now, recruit uniform, scared, unsure. This woman changed his life and he'd started by throwing rocks. Ma'am, I'm sorry for what I did, who I was. Evelyn looked at him, smiled. You learn. That's everything. You'll be a good Marine. Remember, strength isn't violence, it's control, discipline, choosing not to throw the rock. Brendan crying, nodding. Yes, ma'am, I promise. Good. On that night, precisely 0600, Evelyn woke. Alert. Clear. The way dying people sometimes get final moments of clarity. Garrett was there, had been all night. Evelyn looked at him, then toward window, sun rising, jets taking off, punctual, reliable, continuing mission. She smiled. Right on schedule. Breathing slowed, steadied, stopped. Garrett held her hand. Watched sunrise. Watched jets. Understood some departures were peaceful. Earned. Right. Evelyn Frost, Raven 6, had flown home. Funeral was 10 days later. Full military honors at Miramar, 700 people. More than Evelyn would have believed. More than she'd have wanted, exactly what she'd earned. Marines across country, veterans from 4 decades, officers and enlisted, young and old, all honoring a woman most had never met, but all had been touched by. Front row surprise made Garrett catch breath. Woman, mid-30s, Middle Eastern features, holding hand of 20-year-old man, both crying. After service, they approached. Staff Sergeant Thorne, I'm Amira. This is my son, Jamal. Pause, emotional. 20 years ago, Fallujah, Gunnery Sergeant Frost had shot at my husband, bomb maker, but Jamal was in his arms. She didn't take shot, saved my son's life. Pulled out photo, faded, baby, 6 months old. My husband was killed 3 days later by his own people. He was trying to leave them. That bomb was his last. He held Jamal to remind himself why he had to stop. Wet eyes. She saved us by not pulling trigger. We found her through news. The demonstration. Had to come. Say thank you, even though too late. Garrett's throat tight. She knew. Always knew she made right choice. He arranged for them to see Evelyn. One last time. Say goodbye to women who'd chosen their lives over military expediency. Eulogy fell to Garrett. He stood at podium, looking at 700 faces, carrying weight of words that could never be enough. Gunnery Sergeant Evelyn Frost. Call sign Raven 6. 93 confirmed kills across 22 years. Pause. But her legacy isn't deaths. It's knowledge that compounds. She trained 64 Marines directly. Those 64 will train hundreds, who will train thousands. Her techniques, her fundamentals, her wisdom will save lives for generations. Gestured to Brendan and crowd. One 17-year-old learned strength is choosing not to throw the rock. To Amira and Jamal. One family learned restraint is sometimes hardest form of courage. To the 64. 64 Marines learned technology as tool, but mastery is human. Voice broke. The Raven has flown home, but her wings still carry us, will carry us, forever. They buried her with honors, 21 guns salute, taps played perfect and heartbreaking. Flag folded with precision. Memorial unveiled week later. Sniper range, bronze statue of Evelyn in teaching position, pointing toward horizon. Toward future. Plaque read simple words GSGT, Evelyn Frost 0317. She taught so others could choose road renamed Raven Six-Way. Program made permanent. Raven Legacy Master Sniper Course. Fully funded. Eternally maintained. But the story didn't end there. Garrett made a phone call to Florida, to his father. Dad, she's gone. Evelyn Frost, Raven 6. Silence online. Then sound of old man crying. She saved me twice, Dalton Thorne said, voice thick. Once in 91. Once by teaching you. She gave me my son back. Made him better than I could have. Tell me she knew. Tell me she knew it mattered. She knew, Dad. She knew. More silence. Then I'm coming out. For the memorial. Need to pay respects. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Been carrying this debt 33 years. Time to set it down. Week later, Dalton Thorne stood at memorial. 74 years old. Wearing dress blues that barely fit. Stood at attention. Rendered salute that lasted full minute. Then spoke. To bronze statue. To daughter he'd never met but owed everything. Ma'am, you gave me my life. Then you gave me my son. Then you made him better. I can never repay that. But I can honor it. By making sure others know. By making sure your lessons continue. Thank you, Raven 6. Semper Fi. He placed something at statue base. The brass compass. The one Evelyn had mentioned. The one his daughter had given him. The one he'd carried through Desert Storm. Inscription on back to teach others to be better. Dalton Thorne, 2024. 1 year later, Garrett walked through Hangar 7. 28 new students assembled. 10 women, record number. Instructor stepped forward. Staff Sergeant Juliet Brennan, carrying Evelyn's Winchester, using Evelyn's methods, but adding modern technology, integration, not replacement. She opened class exactly as Evelyn would have wanted. This course honors a legend, not through worship, through practice, passing forward what she taught. Let me share 6 lessons. Not from me, from Raven 6. She began teaching fundamentals, patience, discipline, the invisible things making visible possible. Outside Marines running morning PT. Every single one saluted statue passing. Tradition emerged organically, respectfully, permanently. In Base Museum, Evelyn's dope book sat in glass case. Open, 82 Marines had added entries. Data, techniques, lessons learned. Latest entry, wind pattern analysis per Raven method. Target engaged 1,340 yards Mogadishu. 3 hostages saved, 0 casualties. Teaching this to next class. Staff Sergeant J. Brennan, 2025. And the story continued growing. Year 2, 200 Marines trained. Year 5, Raven method adopted corps-wide. Year 10, first all-female class graduated. Highest scores in program history. Year 15, textbook published. Fundamentals of Advanced Marksmanship, the Raven Legacy. Required reading for all Scout Sniper candidates. Year 20, Brendan Walsh, now gunnery sergeant, stood before his own class. 32 students, eager, uncertain. He opened with story. 20 years ago, I was 17. Stupid. Threw rocks at a homeless woman under a bridge. That woman was Gunnery Sergeant Evelyn Frost. Raven 6, greatest sniper the Marine Corps ever produced. He paused, let it settle. She taught me strength isn't violence. It's control, discipline, choosing not to throw the rock. Then she taught 64 Marines fundamentals that are now saving lives worldwide. Some of you are here because of techniques she pioneered. Most of you don't know her name. That's exactly what she wanted. He picked up a Winchester. Not Evelyn's original, but same model, same principle. For the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you what she taught me. Not from computers, from understanding. Because algorithms predict, but humans understand. And that difference saves lives. He began teaching, the cycle continuing, knowledge compounding, growing, spreading. On flightline jets continued their endless work. Launch and recovery, mission after mission. The rhythm of service never stopping. Somewhere in that rhythm, in those wings, in those missions, Evelyn Frost flew still. Not in body, but in legacy, in knowledge, in the compound interest of wisdom passed generation to generation. She'd asked not to be remembered, but she'd taught lessons that couldn't be forgotten. And in the end, that was everything. Everything she'd wanted, everything that mattered, everything that would last, long after names fade, long after statues weather, long after memory becomes myth. The lessons remain, passed forward, nameless, eternal. Raven 6's final mission, complete.